"You don't belong here. Move!" The words were sharp, but the slap that followed? Louder, harder. It echoed through Gate 17 like a gunshot. A silver badge clattered across the tile floor, spinning near the polished shoes of a stunned businessman. A few gasps rose. No one moved. Charlotte Brooks, just 11 years old, stood frozen in her neatly pressed military honor uniform. The navy jacket, gold-trimmed lapel, and the nameplate on her chest marked her as a Gold Star family representative, traveling to accept a medal on behalf of her brother, a fallen Marine. Her cheek burned. The woman who struck her, flight attendant Dana Holloway, didn't look sorry. "This isn't a costume party," Dana snapped. "First class is for real passengers." Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't yell. She bent down slowly, picked up her badge, and held it gently for a moment. Then she flipped it over, pressing her thumb against a hidden sensor. It blinked, once blue, then red. Dana rolled her eyes. "Security will be here in 2 minutes. Maybe then you'll learn. You should probably call the Department of Defense instead," Charlotte said softly. Her voice was even, measured, almost too calm for a child who'd just been hit. Within 60 seconds, the terminal lights flickered, and an overhead announcement crackled to life. "Notice, Gray Flag Protocol has been activated. Joint operations temporarily suspended at this gate." All movement stopped. In 9 airports across the country, military-linked systems triggered immediate lockdowns. Flights rerouted, boarding canceled. Charlotte stood alone, dust on her sleeve, badge back on her chest, silent. But in that silence, the balance of power had already shifted. And Dana? She had no idea what she'd just done. An hour earlier, Charlotte Brooks sat alone in the far corner of the VIP lounge at Fort Liberty Airport, legs crossed neatly at the ankle, hands folded in her lap. Her military honor uniform was crisp, the nameplate polished, the Gold Star badge pinned directly over her heart. People passed by, barely noticing her. Some glanced once and moved on. Others offered polite smiles, assuming she was part of a school program or maybe playing dress-up. A woman in heels whispered to her husband, "That must be for some parade or something." Nobody asked why she was there. Nobody asked where her parents were. But Charlotte was used to being invisible. She watched a digital clock above the terminal doors, ticking down toward the hour she'd board the flight to Washington, D.C., where she would accept the posthumous medal awarded to her brother, Corporal Adam Brooks, who died 3 months ago in Helmand. It wasn't the kind of trip you looked forward to. Charlotte wasn't a loud kid. She didn't like attention. But this flight wasn't about comfort. It was about honor. Her father told her that morning before leaving for base, "Your brother stood for something, and today, so do you." She said nothing at the time, just nodded. Now, sitting alone, Charlotte ran her thumb slowly along the edge of the badge, an oval of polished silver etched with an eagle and 3 stars, a gift from her brother before he deployed. A loud laugh broke her thoughts. Someone behind her making fun of a child playing military. She didn't turn around. Instead, she stood up, adjusted her collar, and walked toward Gate 17 with quiet, steady steps. She didn't know that in less than an hour, that gate would fall silent, that a grown woman would strike her in front of dozens, that 9 airports would darken by her touch. All she knew was this: she had her brother's name on her chest, and no one was going to tell her she didn't belong. Dana Holloway had been flying first-class routes for over 18 years. She knew how to spot them, the real passengers, the ones who belonged. The tailored suits, the watch that quietly said 6 figures, the polished shoes, the calm confidence that came with knowing your place in the world. And she knew just as easily who didn't. She called it the gut test. 5 seconds flat, posture, clothes, tone of voice. It worked 99% of the time. So when Dana caught sight of the small girl in a military-style outfit near the first-class line, dragging a plain navy duffel behind her and holding what looked like a prop badge. Her gut said no. Kids didn't belong up there, not unless they were attached to someone important. And this one? No parents, no fancy luggage, no VIP assistant. Just a serious face and big brown eyes that didn't look scared, but should have been. Dana stepped in front of her, palm raised. "Sweetheart, this line is for first-class passengers," she said with a tight smile. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The girl met her eyes, unblinking. "Yes, ma'am. I have a boarding pass." Dana didn't even look at it. The paper felt real, but she'd seen plenty of clever fakes. Entitled parents upgrading their kids. Rich families trying to push boundaries. What really pushed her over the edge was the badge. That shiny little piece of metal pinned like a prop. Dana had seen enough staged respect to last a lifetime. "Where are your parents?" she asked, firmer now. "Flying separately," the girl replied calmly. "You're not military," Dana said, voice flat. "And you're not first class, so step aside." The girl didn't, and for the first time that day, Dana's gut wasn't telling her what she expected. There was something about this child, something unnerving in how calm she stayed. Still, Dana did what she always did when someone pushed back. She took control. She raised her voice. She waved the girl away, and when words didn't work, she lifted her hand. The line at gate 17 had grown tense. Charlotte stood in place, her boarding pass still firm in her hand. Dana Holloway's voice had gone from polite to sharp, her tone bouncing off the walls like a warning bell. "Step aside," Dana hissed. "You're holding up the line." The girl didn't move. People behind them shifted uncomfortably. A man in a blazer glanced at his watch. An older woman muttered something about kids today having no respect. No one spoke up. No one asked what the badge on Charlotte's chest meant. Dana reached for the badge again. Charlotte stepped back, clutching it with both hands. "Please don't touch that," she said quietly. "You think you can flash some fake pin and walk onto a first-class flight?" Dana snapped. And then, without warning, the slap landed. It wasn't light. It wasn't a tap. It was a full, open-hand slap that sent Charlotte stumbling half a step sideways. The terminal went silent. The businessman behind her dropped his coffee. A flight attendant across the counter gasped. Even the gate agent's fingers froze over the keyboard. Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't scream. She reached down, picked up her badge, and calmly tucked her boarding pass into the front of her uniform. Then, without a word, she slid one finger under the badge's baseplate. A red light pulsed once. A soft electronic chime echoed overhead. The boarding screen flickered, went dark. The status bar blinked red. Gate 17, under protocol lockdown, all operations suspended. Security guards looked around, unsure what was happening. Dana stepped back, confused. Charlotte looked up at her. Her voice was soft, almost too calm. "You may want to call your supervisor and the Department of Defense." In that moment, Donna's face drained of color. A ripple of whispers spread across the terminal. Charlotte didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because in 57 seconds, 9 airports would halt, and every person in that terminal would finally ask the same question: who is she? Gate 17 remained still. Too still for a major airport. Phones started ringing behind the gate desk. The jet bridge lights blinked off. One of the screens now read in bold red, "Gray flag protocol level 2, awaiting command clearance." No one knew what that meant, but they knew it wasn't normal. Dana Holloway took a shaky step back, her confidence unraveling fast. This has to be some mistake." Charlotte said nothing. Instead, she took a seat in the corner of the gate area, crossed her legs just like she had in the VIP lounge, and pulled a small encrypted tablet from her duffel bag. A login screen appeared. Facial recognition accepted. She tapped once. Miles away, in a glass-paneled office overlooking D.C., General Donovan Brooks glanced down at his vibrating phone. He didn't flinch when he saw the alert. Charlotte protocol activated. Gate 17. He exhaled through his nose, calm but focused. To everyone else, he was the Deputy Director of Homeland Security's Joint Aviation Oversight Division. To Charlotte, he was just Dad. He picked up the secure line. Get me FAA command, now. I want the gate frozen, the staff isolated, and the backup team deployed quietly. Civilian panic level stays at 0. Behind him, a digital map blinked as 9 airports lit up red, signaling an auto-response tied to a single access badge. Charlotte's. Back at Gate 17, Dana was still rattling off excuses to the gate agent, who was now no longer listening. A woman in uniform approached Charlotte. Military-grade headset, no airline logo. She whispered something. Charlotte nodded once. The woman turned and headed toward the captain's cabin. Passengers began murmuring. Charlotte sat quietly, hands folded, watching the fallout unfold around her. She wasn't trying to scare anyone. She wasn't angry. She just wasn't going to let the world pretend her brother's name didn't matter. And thanks to the man on the other end of that call, the world was about to remember it. Within 20 minutes, #Gate17 was trending. At first, it was a blurry photo. A young girl in a military-style uniform, sitting alone while crew members scrambled behind her. The photo was captioned, "What did this child do to shut down an entire gate?" Then came the videos, clipped from smartphones, of Dana Holloway slapping Charlotte, followed by the eerie lights dimming and the boarding screens blinking out. Someone uploaded the audio from the overhead announcement. Another added subtitles. By the time Charlotte looked up from her tablet, CNN, Reuters, and 2 local stations had already requested access to her Department of Defense profile. But access was locked. Not denied. Not restricted. Locked. As in, national level redacted. People don't get locked files unless they're connected to something much bigger. By the time Dana realized how bad things were, it was too late. Her photo was everywhere. A screenshot from the video, her hand raised, face twisted in frustration, captioned with, "She slapped a Gold Star child." She didn't know who the girl was. This woman works first class? Charlotte, still seated, watched without expression. Not a smile, not a tear, just quiet. The man across from her, a former Navy vet in a ball cap, leaned over and asked softly, "Was it your brother?" Charlotte nodded. "Helmand Province, 3 months ago." He placed his hand over his heart. "Semper Fi." Charlotte whispered back, "Thank you." Dana, meanwhile, was being pulled aside by 2 uniformed men she didn't recognize. Not airline security, not TSA, real uniforms. Federal-grade silence. The gate agent stepped away from his desk, speaking into a radio, nodding slowly. Around them, whispers turned to stares. No one defended Dana now. Charlotte stood, brushed off her sleeves, and walked to the window. She wasn't here to destroy anyone. But some lessons need to be public, especially when the whole world forgets that even the quietest passenger might carry a name worth saluting. Charlotte sat in a private security room, her small frame dwarfed by the oversized leather chair. A cup of water sat untouched beside her, condensation pooling on the table. 2 men in dark suits entered, not airport staff, not even airline. These were from the Federal Aviation Ethics Division, a joint task unit few people had even heard of, let alone met. The taller one sat down first. "Charlotte Brooks," he said, voice calm but watchful. "We know who you are. What we need now is confirmation. From you." Charlotte nodded. No fear, just posture straight, shoulders set the way her brother had taught her. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Authorization Alpha November 7. That was it. 1 sentence, and the tablet in her bag chimed. The men exchanged glances. Within seconds, the overhead screen in the room flickered on. It displayed a federal seal followed by 5 lines of redacted text. And then, access granted. Skylock clearance level 4. ID Brooks, Charlotte, Unit 17. The shorter man leaned forward. Charlotte, do you understand what activating the gray flag protocol means? She looked him square in the eye. It means 9 airports suspend operational authority until the FAA and DoD jointly review the event. And do you understand who can trigger it? Yes, myself, or my father. Silence. Back at Gate 17, Dana was being escorted off the floor in silence. No apologies, no exit speech. The passengers had cleared the area, but not before someone projected the news coverage onto the airport wall. Her photo loomed over her exit, frozen in shame. She had no idea that Charlotte's badge wasn't a toy. It was part of Skylock, a classified federal identification system designed for dependents of high-risk defense personnel, especially those who had received posthumous honors. The badge carried an ethics override token, allowing the bearer to flag real-time airport violations for federal review in moments when dignity or protocol was breached beyond civilian measures. Only 3 children in the country carried it. Charlotte was one. The man with the tablet asked gently, "Why did you activate it?" Charlotte paused, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted her words to land exactly right. "I didn't activate it because she hit me," she said quietly. "I activated it because she dismissed my brother's sacrifice like it meant nothing, because she called my badge fake, because she looked at me and saw a kid with no value." The room fell quiet again. The taller agent finally leaned back, let out a long breath, and said, "The protocol is valid. No violations on your end." Charlotte didn't flinch. She asked if I was pretending to be military, she added. "But I'm not. I'm family." Meanwhile, at a secure FAA terminal, General Donovan Brooks stood in front of 6 men and women from the FAA, Homeland, and Department of Defense. Each one held a folder. None had opened it yet. He began speaking. "My daughter did not overstep. She followed Skylock ethics protocol to the letter. That protocol exists because 2 years ago, another Gold Star child was pulled off a flight for wearing a uniform. No one acted then. We didn't create this system for press. We created it to prevent shame from becoming policy." A younger executive at the table shifted. 9 airports locked down. That's a lot. Brooks looked directly at him. So is the cost of silence. Back at the airport, news outlets were beginning to shift tone. Charlotte was no longer the child at the center of a shutdown. She was now referred to as Charlotte Brooks, daughter of General Donovan Brooks, and sister to fallen hero Corporal Adam Brooks. A new clip was being shared rapidly. It showed Dana rolling her eyes just before the slap, paired with text that read, "When arrogance meets consequences." At the gate, a quiet announcement echoed. "Boarding is now resuming at Gate 17. First-class passengers only, beginning with Ms. Charlotte Brooks." Dana was gone. The crew was replaced. Charlotte stood, badge shining like steel under the light. She didn't walk faster or slower than usual. She just walked straight, past the whispers, past the stairs, onto the plane. And when she sat down in 1A, not a single person questioned whether she belonged. Not anymore. By the time Charlotte's flight took off, Dana Holloway's world had collapsed in less than 3 hours. It started with a temporary suspension notice handed to her on the tarmac, short, cold, and unsigned. She barely had time to process it before her airline credentials were revoked in the internal system. When she tried to log into the crew app, her profile read, "Status, under federal investigation, do not assign flights." A security guard walked her out of the restricted area. No ceremony, no apology, just silence. At the same time, the internal HR chat room of Falcon Air exploded. Crew members dropped screenshots of the video. Former employees began sharing anonymous stories about Donna's tone, her attitude, and how she always acted like she owned the first-class cabin. And then came the boardroom call. The CEO of Falcon Air was already facing pressure from the FAA after being notified that the airline had failed to complete mandatory bias training for senior crew members, training that should have been renewed 8 months ago. This one moment had opened a backlog of negligence. Worse, the gray flag protocol activation had automatically triggered a system-wide ethics hold across all Falcon Air-operated flights passing through federal air corridors. That meant 9 airports delayed Falcon Air traffic by 3 hours. $6.7 million in commercial partnership contracts were temporarily frozen. Their Sky Priority access at 2 major terminals was suspended pending review. The airline's comms director attempted a soft spin. "We're conducting an internal review and remain committed to dignity and inclusion." But it was too late. Social media wasn't waiting. Meanwhile, inside the plane, Charlotte sat quietly. A flight attendant, not Dana, offered her hot tea and a blanket without saying much. But her eyes carried what words couldn't. Respect. Not pity. Respect. Across the aisle, a businesswoman leaned over and said, "I hope you know how many people needed to see what you did today." Charlotte replied, almost a whisper, "I didn't do it for them." Pause. "But I'm glad they were watching." Back in Washington, D.C., General Brooks stood in front of a closed-door press panel. His tone was firm but calm. "This isn't about a slap. This is about a culture in the sky that has allowed uniform judgment to override basic human decency." The FAA administrator beside him added, "The Skylock system was built for moments like this. It worked. And now, we're requiring all federal air partners to submit to a 72-hour ethics compliance audit." When asked directly whether Falcon Air's licenses would be affected, Brooks didn't flinch. They already are. A different terminal. Same day. Dana sat alone in an unmarked conference room, waiting for a hearing that would determine whether her actions disqualified her from future FAA certification. There were no lawyers present, no union rep beside her, just a silent screen on the wall displaying, "Pending review, violation of Section 17C, Ethics Clause, respect toward identifiable protected parties," and above it, her own hand, frozen in midair, taken from a still of the viral video. She tried to explain that she didn't mean it, that she was under pressure, that the girl looked like she was pretending, but the truth was simple. She didn't ask. She didn't pause. She just assumed. And now, the system she once thought would protect her was exposing her instead. Back on the plane, in the air, Charlotte looked out the window as clouds blurred by. Her badge sat quietly beside her. Light turned off now. Protocol ended. Systems back online. She wasn't angry, but she was changed. And so was the system that had ignored girls like her, families like hers, for too long. As the captain made a soft announcement about turbulence ahead, Charlotte whispered to herself, "Let them feel it." Not because she wanted revenge, but because some turbulence teaches what smooth skies never will. The press conference wasn't supposed to be public, but after 3 federal agencies and 2 Senate committees got involved, transparency became the only option. At exactly 2:00 p.m., in a room lined with American flags and FAA insignia, General Donovan Brooks stepped up to the podium. His uniform was sharp, posture locked. His face the same calm steel that once commanded missions overseas. But today, he wasn't here as a general. He was here as a father. "Let me be clear," he began. Charlotte Brooks did not violate protocol. She activated it, and the system worked because it was designed for the exact moment where dignity is denied, not by threat, but by arrogance. A journalist raised a hand. "Sir, can you confirm who authorized your daughter's Skylock credentials?" Brooks didn't blink. "I did, after she buried her brother." Gasps moved through the room. Corporal Adam Brooks, Marine Corps, KIA Helmand Province, March 9th. Charlotte was 12 when she received that badge, not as a gift, but as a designation. She trained for months. She passed simulation reviews higher than some TSA agents. She earned it. A second reporter asked, "Is she still active in the system?" He nodded. As of today, she remains one of only 3 civilian miners with Level 4 Skylock access. Then he paused, leaned closer to the mic. And if the airline had simply listened, if that crew member had paused to ask instead of slap, none of this would have been necessary. Across the country, airline boards scrambled to recheck compliance, to download training materials they'd long ignored. At Falcon Air HQ, the CEO watched the broadcast in silence. Then, without saying a word, he picked up the phone and requested a meeting with the FAA Compliance Council. Because this wasn't about one girl anymore. This was about what happens when silence meets a badge backed by truth. 3 days after the Gate 17 incident, the FAA released a statement that rippled across the entire aviation industry. No flashy headlines, no dramatic music, just a quiet memo labeled Implementation of the Dignity Protocol, effective immediately. Inside were 4 pages that would reshape how airlines operate. Every major U.S. airline was now required to complete quarterly ethics training, not just for flight attendants, but for all personnel with passenger interaction. Any crew member found violating ethics policy toward a Skylock-designated dependent would be placed under immediate federal review. The FAA would publish a quarterly passenger ethics compliance report, naming airlines that failed inspections. Most notably, the Skylock badge system, once secret, was now officially recognized as a protected federal designation, backed by Homeland Security. Charlotte's name was never directly mentioned, but insiders knew. And when the document was published, her ID number, Brooks Unit 17, was listed under active designations. At a small press table that day, a retired airline captain was asked how he felt about the new regulation. He leaned forward, thoughtful. I've seen war heroes fly coach without complaint, and I've seen folks in first class act like kings. But that girl, she never raised her voice. She never needed to. Pause. That's what real strength looks like. And now, the skies will finally start to remember that. Back in D.C., Charlotte sat at her bedroom window, watching jets pass overhead in silence. Her badge was tucked safely in a drawer now, but its echo, already rewriting how an entire nation flew. By the end of the week, 9 countries had requested access to Skylock protocol documentation. Japan sent a formal inquiry. Canada issued a preliminary ethics review for all domestic carriers. And in London, Heathrow's operations board voted 6-1 to suspend partnerships with any airline that failed to comply with passenger dignity standards by the end of the quarter. The ripple had turned into a tide. News outlets shifted tone from the slap seen round the terminal to the girl who grounded 9 airports and rewired the skies. But Charlotte didn't care about headlines. She was back in school, quiet, uniform ironed, badge put away. When her history teacher mentioned current events and used aviation ethics reform as an example, Charlotte kept her head down. She didn't want applause. She just didn't want it to happen to anyone else. That evening, General Brooks knocked lightly on her door. "There's someone on video call asking to speak with you," he said. "International." Charlotte walked to the screen. A calm, elegant woman appeared. Behind her was the flag of the European Aviation Commission. "Miss Brooks," she said warmly, "we'd like to invite you to speak at the Global Passenger Ethics Forum next month in Brussels." Charlotte blinked. "I'm just a kid," the woman smiled. "And yet, you reminded an entire industry what grown-ups forgot." Outside, a plane soared through the sunset sky. For the first time in years, Charlotte looked up, not with grief, but quiet pride. Some changes don't roar in with engines. They land quietly, but they stay. The ballroom at the Global Passenger Ethics Forum in Brussels was filled with delegates from over 40 countries. Suits, flags, cameras. But all eyes turned as an 11-year-old girl walked onto the stage, not with a dramatic entrance, but steady steps and a quiet breath. Charlotte Brooks adjusted the microphone. She didn't look down at any notes. "You don't need a badge," she began, "to know when something's wrong." The room hushed. "What happened to me wasn't rare. That's the problem. It was normal, and sometimes normal needs to be interrupted." She paused, looked out at rows of airline executives, federal regulators, and ethics officers. "My brother taught me that silence can be dignified, but sometimes silence lets people keep getting hurt. So, I used my voice." Another pause. this time softer. And if a kid can change something with one badge and one decision, what's stopping you? A full minute of silence followed. Then, a standing ovation. Not loud, but long. 1 month later, the Passenger Ethics Accord was officially signed by 23 nations. The FAA released the Gate 17 Ethics Framework, named in quiet honor of where it all started. Dana Holloway's FAA license was permanently revoked. Falcon Air was placed under mandatory federal oversight for 2 years. And Charlotte? She returned home, back to school, back to her quiet world. Her badge stayed in a drawer now, locked, protected. She hoped she'd never need it again. But across the world, signs went up in terminals and training centers. Dignity is not optional, it's policy. And every time a crew member glanced at those words before a flight, they didn't know the girl behind them, but they knew better than to ignore the next one. What would you have done if you were in Charlotte's place? Just 11 years old, but holding the key to ground a whole airline. Tell us where you're watching from, and let us know. Do you think dignity in the skies can ever be truly enforced? Or is it still just a privilege for the few?